We're just 1 week away from the first men's major championship of 2023. Live from the Masters begins next Monday at 2 o'clock Eastern time, right here on Golf Channel. Odds to win the men's first majors. Scotty Scheffler, plus 700. He is 7-1, followed by Rory McIlroy and Jon Rahm. The odds makers following the world golf rankings at the moment with their 1, 2, 3. What do you think of those, Eamon?
Well, everyone else is looking at those three guys as well. It's going to be an interesting one, the fourth guy on that list, Cameron Smith, who's spending his week warming up at Orange County National in Orlando, Florida, which wouldn't seem to be the most obvious warm-up location for the Masters.
Your most intriguing storyline, aside from where Cameron Smith is getting his game ready for Augusta National, what are the most intriguing storylines for you?
Well, to me, there are two intriguing storylines, and the play itself at Augusta National always becomes the storyline. Leading into it, there are two particular angles, one of which involves obviously Cameron Smith. This will be the first time that we've seen the LIV guys and PGA Tour guys collide since last summer at the Open Championship. 18 of them will be in the field at Augusta, and the dynamic will be interesting because there have been some outspoken former champions, particularly talking about the Champions Dinner Tuesday night. Ben Crenshaw was on the show last week. He said it could be tense. Whereas Fred Couples, a lot more vocal. He's referred recently to Phil Mickelson as a nutbag. He referred to Sergio Garcia as a clown. Doesn't necessarily lend itself to a genial dinner table conversation, I would think. So that's one of the angles there, and that becomes a continuing angle if one of the LIV guys plays well enough to put themselves in the mix later during the week. But you
think in the dinner that guys won't just bear it for 2-3 hours?
I don't think there will be an issue with it. I think it'll be tense, but I don't think there'll be an issue because they all understand that they're there for Scotty Scheffler.
Yes.
And that they're not necessarily there for any of their own agenda. So I imagine there'll be a lot of grinning and bearing it at that one. But in terms of the noise around it and comments that may be made by players on either side of that divide, I'm not so sure that civility will hold up all week long. But the closest thing we have in golf to a state of the nation is when Augusta National's chairman speaks on Wednesday, because with all due respect to Martin Slumbers and Mike Wan, that's where the real power exists in the game of golf. And one of the questions that Fred Ridley is going to be asked is obviously about the distance debate and this proposal for a modified local rule to roll the golf ball back a little bit. And if you go back and look at Fred Ridley's comments from his press conference last year, it would suggest a man who's very much in favour of action being taken. He suggested last year that he's patient, but his patience is not unlimited. And
they don't want to have to keep spending millions and millions of dollars to extend the 13th and buy up around the perimeter of Augusta National? You think they're getting close to a point where that's getting a little old?
Well, they have bought a lot of property, but they typically use it for the logistics of the tournament, like car parking. They're not interested in extending golf holes much more than they've already done with the 13th. And if you're Mike Wan and Martin Slumbers, this is the cavalry riding in now, because if Fred Ridley suggests that the Masters will use the option of a limited ball in 2026, if it's available, that's 3 of the 4 majors that would do so. The PGA Championship is not going to be the outlier in that. They will not allow themselves to be seen as less than the others. And to the point Rory McIlroy made last week, when he was asked about it, that raises the issue for the PGA Tour. Do you want to separate yourself from the pinnacle of the game and become seen as a more of an entertainment product? And that's going to be an interesting one to play out over the next couple of years. But we're going to have a real signpost on that debate next Wednesday in Augusta.
I wholeheartedly agree. And I do think right now you're still in the, I guess, fact-finding and negotiation with what the USGA and RNA put out. And this is their listening period through mid-August. I think the PGA Tour and the governing bodies are a lot closer than it initially appears. And these extreme examples of guys using one ball for majors, one ball for the PGA Tour, in actuality, that's never going to come to fruition. For me, the most intriguing storyline, and I'm going to add one. I know I had initially said prior to the show, Rory McIlroy and his quest for the career Grand Slam. And then I was just thinking back, what were the most intriguing storylines last year? It was Tiger Woods at the start of the week making the cut. We only, as golf fans, maybe get, if we're lucky, 5-6 times a year we're going to get to see Tiger Woods going forward. Augusta would be his second event this year. There were some positives from the Genesis, but overall, the big storyline is, can his body withstand the rigors of 4 days? And then for Rory McIlroy, he was the story, aside from Scottie Scheffler, on Sunday. Will that final round 64, which was the new lowest final round in Masters history, lowest score we've seen on Sunday at Augusta National, will that be what provides Rory kind of the type of peace he needs inside the ropes to get it done at Augusta National? Or are we going to be having the same conversations we've had the last 8 years since Rory's been trying to cap off the career Grand Slam? Will those continue through 2023 into 2024? I think regardless, if Rory finishes first, if Rory misses the cut, if Rory's in contention and comes up short, that's going to be one of the dominant headlines the Monday after the Masters.
Sure, and we're going there now after what we saw in Austin, where what was a question mark going into Austin is now an exclamation mark. What was a weakness is now a weapon in terms of both the driver and the putter. He seems more confident in both of those clubs. Every year we see Rory go to Augusta, and you made the point last week, he seems to have a different mental game approach to it. It was interesting just hearing him. The only reference he made to that was just figuring out what shots the course needs and approach it that way, purely as a statistical exercise and an exercise of how he's going to approach the game, not how he's going to rationalise being there.
Tiger not on your radar at all, heading into Augusta?
Tiger's always on the radar, but he's not the #1 story going into this year, I don't think, for a change.
It's definitely a change. I mean, he's occupied the top spot since, 1997, more or less, when it comes to Masters storylines?
Well, he may actually speak out on all of the other storylines that we think are there as well. So whatever Tiger says, we're going to listen.